So, good evening and welcome to Suffering in Silence with Pastor Tia here on Love Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. And Love Baby wants you to remember that we are always rising out of the ashes together. Our topic on this evening is mental and emotional health of men. We have with us our co-host this evening, Jennifer Peterkin of the Human Experience, and our guest for the evening is Dr. Karl Morris. So, listeners, if you have any questions or comments for myself, for our guest, or our co-host, you can email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com. You can also text us at 437-778-3299. Please also remember to like, share, and subscribe, whichever media platform you are viewing us by. And also, if you have any resources that you would like to share with us on a national or local level from your country, your community, or any faith organization, you can also email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com. And with that, Jen, if you would greet our listeners and viewers tonight.
Yeah, of course. Hello, Love Bay. So happy to be here once again on Suffering in Silence with Pastor Tia. Always an honor to be on as a co-host. If you are a first-time listener, welcome. We're happy to have you. My name is Jennifer Peterkin. I'm a domestic violence survivor and advocate, and have been working with Tia for several years on this program, as well as her organization, Rise Out of the Ashes.
Thank you so much. Dr. Karl Morris, would you introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers?
Absolutely. So good day, everyone. My name is Karl Morris. I am a professor of computer science at Temple University. I've been with that institution now for closing out 11 years. I have, through that office, as well as other initiatives I've been engaged in for the past 10 years or so, I've had the opportunity to address, or at least had opportunities to deal with situations where men's mental health, or let's to put it another way, the societal pressures placed on men, I've found it to create issues and situations that were germane to my specific field and some of my priorities, which was mainly getting a lot of or more Black and brown kids into STEM, getting more of them into computer science. It was sort of interesting when I started to find out many years ago that some of the stumbling blocks really tied back to this narrative, to this issue of sort of what support systems are in place for men and boys dealing with mental health issues and how it was preventing certain types of progress. So I'm happy to be here to discuss this. I want to be clear, I'm a doctor of computer science, not of mental health or such a field. So I'm really here as a proxy in some ways, and as someone who has dealt with some of these issues in a non-clinical way.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We always stress we are not professionals. We are regular people, just like everyone else, sharing our thoughts, our views, and everything that we do. The end result for us, the end game, we always hope that we're starting a conversation somewhere else, a conversation that will lead to action for those who are listening and watching us. So again, Love Bay, if you have any questions or comments, you can text 437-778-3299. You can also call in your questions or your comments in addition to whichever social media platform you're watching by. So we want to share some resources before we begin. We are continuing to raise funds for Rise Out of the Ashes, Inc. That is my nonprofit. Jen is the vice president of it. What we do is support victims and survivors of domestic violence. Our biggest endeavor is helping with transitional resources, providing funds for emergency funding. We help individuals get from one location to another, which is a safe space for them to be in. We help with funds for food?
We do a lot of, it's rapid funding. So anywhere that a domestic violence center may not be able to step in, they may have limited funds or resources. We aim to step in to help with things like moving costs, food, healthcare costs, clothing, etc.
Thank you so much, Jen. So if you would like to give to Rise Out of the Ashes Inc., you can write a check made payable to us. We are at P.O. Box 15. We are in Drexel Hill, PA 19026. Also, my book, Suffering in Silence, is available on Amazon. We use proceeds from that to help in this endeavor as well. We want to share with you Befrienders Volunteer Action to Prevent Suicide. Their website is befrienders.org. You can find a helpline by country if you visit their website. We want to share the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Their website is thehotline.org. Their number is 1-800-799-7233. And we want to share the National Sexual Assault Hotline. Their number is 800-656-HOPE-4673. And their website is rainn.org, RAINN.org. And with that
was kind of perfect timing. I wasn't going to be able to finish that if she didn't get there. So, well, Dr. Karl Morris, we are so happy to have you on tonight. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us.
No problem.
Sorry, listeners, we're having a little bit of technical difficulty.
Say the least.
Yeah. So, all right. So if I drop, just keep going. So,
all right.
Before we start, I just want to really quickly give the backstory of why we're having this conversation. So our topic is mental and emotional health of men. So Dr. Karl and I have a mutual friend, Dr.
Can you tell that story?
I can, though with a little less insight, perhaps. So we were, Pastor Tia and I were both at a.
Yes, okay. We were at a book signing for Sakila.
I've never had this happen before. So.
We were at a book signing, a collection for a book, a collection of poems, and in one of the readings, there was an issue. One of the poems related to sisterhood and women being there and supporting each other, and it was a beautiful piece. Welcome back.
Yes, it was a beautiful piece. Look, so when Sakila read the poem, it was about sisterhood, women being together. We had a moment to share our thoughts. After the reading of the poem, Karl shared his thoughts, and he said, don't forget about us. Don't forget about the brothers. Don't forget about the men, because we're here too. And two things happened for me immediately. First, when he said that, I felt a weight like just fell on my shoulders, because it was like, women, and especially Black women, we're responsible for yet again something else being put on our plate. Like, that's what came to me immediately. We're responsible for our friends, our husbands, our sons, our nephews, the next door neighbor. It's like we don't have time to deal with our mental and emotional stuff, because we have to be there for everyone else, specifically men. And then a second thing, that came to me, it was like, all right, well, let us have this moment. Let the sisters have this few minutes right here. So after that, I had a chance to talk to Dr. Karl. I shared my thoughts. He explored more, on his thought. And so I wanted to give him this time on tonight to speak about that, the mental and emotional health of men, because it was a very, very valid point. And I wanted to give him that space. So before I cut out again, I'm going to give this to Dr. Karl.
All right. So on the point, so Dr. Sakila Coles, again, was the author who gave a reading of her poem. And to Tia's point, yes, absolutely. Even in that moment, it was almost like, here's another thing being put on the plate of women, of Black women. And certainly one could see it as, if not unfair, then at least perhaps burdensome. And we recognize that. In that moment, I think it wasn't necessarily that I was, it wasn't a call to arms or a rallying cry that, hey, you also need to do this, but more so an invitation for a conversation to simply say, it's amazing that women are providing this support within their groups, within their friend circles, within their family circles. And in that moment, I simply acknowledged that in many ways, men in society lack that same support structure in any real form. Mm-hmm. And it would be, we weren't going to solve anything in that night, but simply to say, we perhaps we're going to need to tackle the issue and start to put solutions on the table to make sure that we are protecting the mental and emotional health of men, giving them an outlet, giving them opportunities, because it is affecting them in ways that they're aware of. It's affecting them in ways they are not aware of. It's affecting broader communities, Black communities, society as a whole, families, households. And until we start to address them, so it undermines any progress we might make in any other space. Mm-hmm. So that was the genesis or the motivation behind my comment at the time. It just, this is a thing that needs to be addressed.
Yeah. And so what I've learned, what I know, what I think we all know is there is no convenient time to be hurt or harmed. There's no convenient time to be dealing with heavy issues. There's not. And so it will come across that, as a woman, I'm dealing with some stuff, and then the male in my household or around me may be dealing with issues too, and we have to try to tackle it all together. But again, specifically just giving voice to it on tonight to open that door for men dealing with mental and emotional health issues. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you is that, do you see those mental and emotional needs of men also tie into dealing with issues of abuse and trauma, trying to focus, trying to get through day to day? Like, is that something that you've seen?
I can't honestly say that I'm able to make that connection personally. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean it isn't there. It doesn't mean that even if just one or two layers down, it would be evident to someone who's trained to look for it. Mm-hmm. Certainly, I can speak to the potential impact, emotional impact that can be experienced by someone who may themselves have experienced abuse, trauma in that regard. And then, the old mantra, hurt people. Mm-hmm. That could easily be the catalyst for their own, among other things, many other things certainly, but the catalyst for how they may treat those around them, those close to them, their spouse, their children. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's necessarily a hot take. But when you find that men are not given outlets, or they're not encouraged to seek them out, not encouraged to engage, then the outlet will find itself, right? It's gonna come out, and it may come out in the most inconvenienced and hurtful ways. So even without being able to say, well, here's what the research says, it seems almost intuitive that this is certainly going to be the case in some way, in some places.
Okay. And so in what you've seen and in what you wanted to express on tonight, are you more yourself in a phase of seeing and recognizing what's going on, like let's put it on a table and have a conversation? Or do you already have outlets in place? Do you already have ideas that will help men in these areas? Or are we still just talking about, let's just talk, let's just open up about it?
Yeah. So lots of thoughts, lots of the concepts of a plan, but no, nothing. It's a complicated issue. What I can say is I try to see the strings. I try to see what the issues are, and then I try to identify how they're manifesting. It would be a stretch too far to say, and I have the fix. But it's whether it's just the type of anger that we can see in our youths, whether it's the epidemic of loneliness we see in men who don't have support structures, who don't have friend networks in, and I don't want to necessarily. I'll keep going.
Yeah.
I don't want to necessarily compare. I don't want to say, well, women have it this way and men have it hard. That's not really the point. It's really just to address the issues. It's recognizing that it is unlikely that these scenarios are creating positive impacts or positive outcomes. So I can say, speaking to something that I personally lived through. So I'm born in Jamaica. I spent most of my life there. I moved to the United States in my early 20s. Went to grad school in Miami, so I spent a few years there, and then moved back to Philadelphia in 2014. And something I experienced, as well as I observed it for many others, is that as a transplant coming into a space in your 20s, in your 30s, it is exceedingly difficult for men. Again, I'll speak to what I know, to create friend networks, to create support structures. That epidemic of loneliness is real, and it's a I would defer to someone in a higher pay grade to speak to how that is negatively impacting the lives of these individuals. Certainly, as an outsider looking on, and you can correct me here, as an outsider looking on, it seems as though women have an easier time at least creating that initial spark when women meet or are in the same space. Perhaps is that connection, that initial connection, and regardless of how deep it may eventually go, it seems easier to make that. Whereas with men, it doesn't matter how many times I'm in a space with you and we say hello, I'm not going to call you or text you the next day. I'm not socially conditioned for that.
Mm-hmm.
So it almost means that for me to have those outlets, I have to always be out. I have to be overly social. I have to be in these spaces. Otherwise, I retract to my own space, my own place, and that sort of absence of a network presents itself.
Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, I think that one of the things that we appreciate here is the value of somebody's experience, their lived experience, right? So, it doesn't matter that your expertise is computer science. This is your lived experience as a human being. And so that has innate value in and of itself. I think it's really interesting, this conversation, especially right now in the current social climate, especially in the United States. And I'll put a huge disclaimer on this for myself too. I mean, I'm a white woman, so that, my experience and Tia's experience in the world is completely different. And so, I want to put that out there as well. But I think that there is something to the idea that women have kind of socially figured out how to connect. I think that there may be something to that around the fact that we've had to, right? I mean, over many, many years, over many, many different cultures and conditions, women a lot of times didn't have the social clout or currency to spend in the broad sense, right? But we had it amongst each other. And so I think even generationally, it's a skill almost that's been passed down. It's also been accessible to us, and for men it hasn't been, right? And so I think that for men there is something there to the fact that that's just not how men are supposed to behave in society with each other. um i I see a lot of hope for change in that. I don't know, what do you think?
I think that it's a generational thing, I believe. So that's where my hope would come from. I don't think anyone my age or older, as much as I would hope for it, is necessarily going to have the kind of seismic shift in their thinking that goes against decades of conditioning. You know, call me pessimistic, but I don't necessarily see that happening. And I think you're right. It really boils down to, and again, recognizing that this is just kind of like my own experience growing up in a country like Jamaica, you found that so much of this also comes with this tinge of, in some ways, homophobia, right? It's this notion that men shouldn't get close, men shouldn't do this, men shouldn't do that. And it carries through. So even when two men, even as adults, as I mentioned earlier, I'll meet someone at an event and we'll shake hands and we'll have a drink and we'll have a good time. But the next day we're not texting to say, "Oh, hey, I hope you get home safe," which is a reasonable thing to ask, but it doesn't happen. And I think so much of that just comes from, that's no homo. We don't talk. Men don't do that. So that permeates and that continues. So yes, insofar as there is any sort of hope of it changing that I've been able to observe, it is generational. I think my generation is better than the generation before me. I think the generation coming after me is better than us, where they are more in tune with their feelings and not afraid to express it. And I don't even want to speak for the generation necessarily, but as an outsider looking in, this is how it presents.
Yeah.
But at the same time, this is also, and I don't know what the statistics are, but this is also the generation, it seems, that brought incels to the fore, which means it's not the perfect solution. It's not like, we all just this generation all held hands and had a kumbaya moment and figured it out. We do see that there is this heightened misogyny in some spaces, in some circles, and it could be very small, but just very loud. But we see this heightened misogyny. We see this kind of anger, I dare say hatred, but and I wonder how these things interconnect. Is it just coming from that loneliness, or is it a more granular thing where it comes from not being able to engage with the opposite sex? I don't know. Again, so we're out of my pay grade at this point. but certainly, I think that change is possible, if not happening, and I hope we continue down that track. Yeah. So maybe my generation will be the last lost generation, where we are just not able to make those types of connections and get those kind of support systems.
I think your comment about homophobia is especially interesting, because I would agree. I think that connection and friendship, even to a degree, or at least the kind of friendship and relationship you're talking about, is seen as very feminine. And in our culture, that's still seen as weakness. And so if somebody is showing those kinds of emotion to their friends as a man, it's seen as feminine, which again is equated with weakness. And so that there's a whole deeper conversation there, right? Because it's not just about men, being able to practice these skills. It's about unlearning the fact that apparently being caring and kind and engaging with other human beings is seen as a weak trait.
Yeah.
And your point to the incel culture that is rising is well made as well, because you're right. It's not all great coming up. There is a loud, I'm hoping as well, minority that don't want to see those changes happen.
Right. And so I assume a separate set of solutions possibly to address this. But yeah, I want to glom on to the positives, and simply and there's also a positive take here. Just by recognizing that men acknowledge this, it's not as though they're closed off or they don't have that level of introspection to recognize that their friend networks are limited, that their connections are limited. Are they empowered to do something about it, to act on it? Perhaps not. Certainly not the large majority. But there's a win there, I think. I remember years ago. This is where just being a computer scientist and a coder kind of helps. I toyed with the idea of building an app to try to address this. So if someone wants an app idea, I'll give you one. The idea was how can we bring men together in a way that acknowledges the societal conditioning that we've received over decades. That doesn't try to ignore it. You don't solve a problem by ignoring the tenets of the problem. That acknowledges that and tries to foster friendships from which other things can come, other things can emerge. Like most of my app ideas, it didn't go anywhere. But I think just like I had that spark, I think a lot of other people out there sort of like, okay, how can this be fixed? Maybe technology, in some ways, it worsens it, but maybe the seeds of the solution might exist there as well. So, to be determined, I imagine.
Sure. Tia, you want to try to get in there while you're
before this beer?
Because she's going to get cut off.
I have so many questions for you, Dr. Karl. If I could just get one of them out. Well, we were talking previously about like the STEM program. So you are among college age men. Do you see that age of men dealing with mental and emotional health issues, that if they could be helped before they get to college, if they had outlets before they got to you, for instance, at Temple, would it be easier for them? Or are there just still some issues that you just have to deal with when you come of age anyway?
Yeah. Some of the things that I identify, a lot of it really speaks to race and ethnicity, and how that may impact whether it's a willingness or an ability to either acknowledge or seek assistance for dealing with issues relating to mental and emotional health. So I wouldn't, in that regard, make a bifurcate or create a line along gender lines, but more so along racial lines. Although you could say that the subset of Black men is perhaps higher. So, for instance, one thing I would notice as a Temple faculty is there is a stark difference between the groups that will either directly request from me as their instructor for any given course certain considerations, or they will go directly to our DRS, our Disability Resource Services Center, to inform them of whatever their personal situation might be, and then have the DRS office reach out to the faculty and say, here are here are the different things that you must consider and make arrangements for this particular student. Almost entirely in my 10 plus years at Temple, that has almost entirely been utilized by non-Black students, almost entirely, which leads to two possible conclusions. Either Black kids in my classrooms are just bastions of mental health, of proper mental health, or they lack the confidence, the willingness, the knowledge and or education about how to go out and seek these resources. And me standing at the front of the class at the beginning of the semester and saying, oh, the DRS office exists, may simply not be enough to motivate someone who may need that intervention, who may need that assistance, to go and seek it. So they are, to plug your book, suffering in silence a lot of times, because they're not utilizing the resources that the university puts in place. Mm-hmm. So that's some of the things that I see directly at the college level. At the pre-collegiate level, it manifests in different ways. It presents in different ways. I've for the longest while, for as long as I've been here, and in fact, before I was here, we would always work with different groups, nonprofits, schools, churches, to create different types of interventions. Usually it's like STEM workshops, programming workshops, mm-hmm. because one of the best tells as to whether or not the student will want to engage in a STEM, or well, more specifically computer science at the college level, has a lot to do with whether or not they were exposed to it before. So trying to improve and increase access was something that I've been working on for many years. And in those spaces, in the pre-collegiate, so you're talking high school, you're talking middle school, and in some cases, even if it's just going to give a talk, it's preschool, you will find, let's say, troubled kids, and I have to be careful about the language I use because I'm not qualified to make it this determination, but the ones who don't sit still, the ones who don't engage with the material or engage with the authority figures, you recognize that there's something there that needs to be addressed, and you ask, is it happening? You recognize internally, at least, is it happening? And it probably isn't, at least not to the degree where I'm observing whether it's just a general improvement or a cessation of the issue. Mm-hmm. So in that area, sure, it certainly presents as though this student or this person is having some sort of emotional issue. And in being in the space, so being invited into a space, it's not my call to necessarily call it out or address it. But it's also not being taken up by the folks in that space, the teachers or whoever else you would like to think would be taking responsibility there. It's not happening, at least not for me to observe. And it leaves the question: is it being addressed at all? So I see it all the time, or I see what I identify as being a student dealing with some sort of emotional issue at the pre-collegiate phase. At the college level, it's not something that shows up. It shows up in the absence. It shows up in the fact that they're not seeking out these resources, and instead you may just have someone just not show up to class for extended periods of time. And as an instructor, you have to be careful about how you reach out, what you do, what you say. It's tricky. It can be a minefield. So oftentimes the best thing you can do is you reach out to DRS or you reach out to some other resource on Temple's campus or any other campus and say, here's a student where I suspect they might be dealing with an issue. Could you please reach out? And schools like Temple actually have done a pretty good job. I like facilitating and resourcing these groups. So there are ways to address it. but certainly it's present and you can observe it.
Okay. So I do want to just throw out there again and mention that, and as you've stated a couple times already, this is an issue that is bigger than all of us. We will not have an answer on tonight, but it's about, for me, putting a conversation on the table. Because it seems to me, as we speak, as I listen, I hear more issues arising out of the original one. Now, my thought is, we know that there are some resources available. We know that mental and health issues exist in our men and in our young men. But at some point, what responsibility do men have for their own emotional and mental well-being? So, and I think it goes beyond women are more social or talkative, so we have an easier time.
Right.
It's like you cannot walk into a classroom and you're just going to fail. You're just going to flunk out because you don't want to take advantage of the resources after the professor has made them available. So again, this is not easy. We don't have all the answers, but there is responsibility.
Yeah. So I hear your point. I hear your question. I approach it tacitly because where I understand what you're getting at, this notion, personal responsibility, having agency, this is all true. However, I always fall back to this idea that the forces that surround us, whether it's convenient or not, whether we want to admit it or not, are much, much stronger oftentimes than a single individual, especially if we're talking about young people, are able to push back against or negate. And I guess what I'm saying is the societal influences that impact a young kid, their environment, their home life, whether or not that student or that kid is experiencing food insecurity, whether or not they're dealing with abuse in the home, whether or not their environment, their neighborhood is safe, whether or not their school, again, if we're talking pre-collegiate, whether their high school is well resourced and all of that. A student who lives that type of life, and it's not as if I'm cherry picking bad situations, and you'd only have this sliver of kids who might have live that experience. I'm sure there are thousands of children in Philadelphia now, tens of thousands who are living a life similar to what I'm describing here. Mm-hmm. I'm reluctant to say the onus is on that student, that individual, to pull themselves up by the bootstraps, to somehow overcome. It would be great. It would be great if they could, but I'm not willing to say if they can't, it's their fault. Mm-hmm. Because it's hard. It's very hard. And I am far more willing to say we as a society, the rules of a society at the end of the day should be, if they aren't explicitly, to take care of the members of that society. That's why we're here. That's the social contract. We all sort of behave under a set of rules, and we make sure that your basic needs and safety are taken care of. The 10-year-old, the 15-year-old, the 18-year-old who is struggling, I think we have an obligation to that person. Not necessarily that they have an obligation to themselves to get over it. And, this is where we get into, well, what do social services look like? What is the government's role? What is the church's role? What is the school's role?
Well, there in all of those roles, there we can pinpoint and we can see where those institutions failed.
Sure.
There was some failure within homes, and then in the communities and organizations that should be there. There was some failure. So I want to say two things. One, definitely not. I am not saying that's not my thought process. That if anyone just can't get out of this himself, that's just it. It's over. It's his fault. That's not my thought process at all. And I also want to say, I know that the men in this world are not on your shoulders right now. Like, it is not for you to come up with an answer to all of this right now. But I do agree that it's an issue that society has to take on as a whole, because I cannot separate the mental and health issues that our young men are dealing with, separate that from what got that to that point. But as you said, there are some things happening in homes. There is food insecurity. There's homelessness. There is abuse. There's sexual abuse. There's physical abuse. There are things going on. All of our kids are not in schools that are giving them a fair chance. We have children in schools. They don't have adequate supplies. They don't walk into a science lab and have all the materials and enjoy new textbooks with up-to-date current information. So some of our children are working against a lot. And I think the huge issue when we talk about mental and emotional health for our college age men is that as children, you don't know how to express yourself. You don't know how to say, you know what, I'm really upset and I'm angry right now because I was up all night. Because I was listening to my parents fight. I was listening to my father hurting my mother, or I didn't eat last night. And the only time I eat is when I get to school. They don't know how to express that. And again, unfortunately, still in society, we have this thing where we are told to boys, don't cry, buck it up, be the man and be okay. Keep it inside. It's like the only emotion some of our boys know how to express is anger, because that's all we give them least to express.
In some ways, it's almost encouraged. So yeah, I think it's tough, and like I think back to my own experience. So I grew up poor in Jamaica, and being poor in a developing country is a whole other type of poor than being poor in a country like the United States. And I experienced violence around me. I grew up in Kingston 19. For anyone who's from Jamaica, they'll know that neighborhood, if not just Kingston. And I've seen violence. I've experienced the death of a loved one. I've experienced food insecurity. I've gone to school hungry. I've gone to bed hungry. I've gone to school without books. I could go through a litany here, and I tell folks at the end of the day, oh, so how did you get where you are? And a lot of times I say, without any cynicism at all, like, I was lucky, because this could have gone in a very different direction. It literally, I can see where I came up on certain crossroads, and it wasn't the direct intervention of any one person or any one thing. Sometimes I just said, okay, I'm going to go left or I'm going to go right. And in the end, it worked out for me. So I can't even give somebody a roadmap and say, oh, here's how you get out of that situation. I was fortunate, and I personally lack the introspection to know if I'm a bastion of good mental health. So I need to go sit down on a couch somewhere to unpack some of my own issues. And I think that's why I am so, adamant that it falls on me, us, and society to help, because I can tell you when I was young, I could have used help. I could have. It would have been nice to know that there was a path where for years and years, I didn't know that there was one. It would have been less anxiety, less worry. And a child worrying when they have no tools to address it is a problem. So yeah, I think that's the conversation we owe each other and our kids. It's our young kids, our young boys. It's to chart this path for them and say, here's how we do it. The interventions have to come from us.
So right now, I want to encourage anyone who is listening, who is hearing, because we're saying a lot of words. If you need resources, if you need to talk, there are some very, very simple things that you can do. First of all, depending on your age and where you are, if you're on a college campus, find a professor, that you feel as though you have a good rapport with, that you can talk to, a counselor on campus. If you're in high school or lower, there are counselors. The mental and emotional hotlines, numbers. When we talk about domestic violence, we can look for agencies online. You could talk to a friend. Sometimes the resource that you need is the closest person to you. So as you have to push past your shell, give yourself permission to help yourself, even if that first step is just asking a question. So we want to be encouraging to say, once you recognize, once you realize, I have some issues or something going on in my mind and in my heart, the next step is to do something about it. So make a phone call, research for agencies that are close to you, hotline numbers that you can call. That's a step that you can take. Like, those are real things that you can do. And then I wanted to say, we have a few minutes left. I wanted to take this time to segue into the talk about Congress, because as we started talking before, you are in the exploratory phase, which I just learned that is a thing. And like, this is part of your platform that you're running on. You strongly believe in the positive mental and emotional health and well-being of our young men. So for you, how does Congress tie into being that you needed or you could have had?
Well, as is the case at any level, whether it's municipal government, state government, or the federal government, it really is about bringing attention and resources to any issue. At the end of the day, that's what a government does. It spends on the things that it believes are important. And ultimately, if you don't have leaders, legislatures, if you don't have an executive that either acknowledges, recognizes, or cares about an issue, don't expect support. We see that right now with discussions in Congress about cuts to Medicaid. Now, you only discuss cuts to Medicaid if you don't care about the health of poor folks. That's it. That there's no prettying that up. And I like to think I'm open-minded. I like to think, lay the facts out in front of me and I'll come to a reasonable conclusion. There's nothing you're going to tell me about saying poor people have too much healthcare that you're going to sell me on. It just boils down to the folks who are there. And I won't make this overly political, but simply say that the folks who currently are able to execute on their plans, this doesn't resonate with them. And whether that is issues relating to housing, whether it's relating to food insecurity, hunger, whether it's relating to mental health and helping to destigmatize mental health care and making it accessible, pumping resources in so that we have more mental health experts, more counselors, more psychologists. that they are accessible, that they accept certain types of insurance. These are the type of things that it will happen if there is political will, but there isn't, so nothing happens. If we want this to change, if we want something different, as citizens, we have the ability to exercise our franchise. And again, I'm not going to give a stump speech here, but to put it simply, putting folks in office who will champion and represent the issues that matter to you is one of the most fundamental things you can do. Should you be cynical about politicians? Absolutely, every one of them. And as you mentioned, I'm in the exploratory phase. If and when my campaign gets off the ground, and if and when I win, you should be cynical about everything I say, and you should keep my feet to the fire in just the same way. But if an incumbent, someone who is in office, feels as though they will not be held accountable because voters are so disengaged and all they need to do is bring out their limited supporters, they don't feel the need to grow their base of support, then they won't act in the interest of the folks that they represent. So my goal is to highlight, bring political will, and bring resources to the issues that I believe are important. General mental health and the destigmatization and the resourcing of tools and services to address issues of mental health is one of my priorities.
Well, thank you so much. I want to share a couple of phone numbers, and then I'll go to you for a question or comment that you may have. But the substance abuse mental health services number, the national helpline is 800-662-4357. And again, the Befrienders volunteer action to prevent suicide. You can find a helpline by country if you visit their website at befrienders.org. And again, the National Domestic Violence Hotline, their website is thehotline.org. Their phone number is 800-799-7233. And the National Sexual Assault Hotline, their number is 800-656-4673. And the website is rainn.org, RAINN.org. And again, we want to encourage men, older men, younger men to take advantage of these resources. They are not just for women. If you have questions, if you are a victim or survivor yourself, if you are supporting a male friend through any of these issues, you can call and get information and learn for yourself. So you will be able to support and you will be able to get what you need for yourself. Jen?
Yeah, I think that personal responsibility in general is important, but I largely agree with your point that a lot of this is systemic and complicated. It's not one issue, and there's no one solution. What would you say, as somebody that's entering politics, what would you say to somebody that's just overwhelmed and kind of defeated and feels like there isn't any way to move forward? Especially young people. And I don't know, you probably have a lot more interaction than I do with them, but what would be your advice to somebody that's just feeling like nothing's ever going to change?
So that's tricky, because when someone does feel defeated, unlike what they may say on Saturday morning cartoons, it's not just about giving an uplifting speech. That doesn't oftentimes rouse people out of feeling defeated or feeling as if there isn't a solution. I think what you have to do is bring receipts. Ultimately, it's about showing I'm speaking with my political hat on. It's showing where attention being placed, when folks care about an issue and they are driven and motivated to actually solve it, whether that's on the macro level or you want to make it personalized and share individual stories, it's about recognizing that there is power in the individual when we act together, when we move together, when we recognize that there is a thing that we want to fix. And if we can push hard enough to move through the political morass and the stagnation, and a lot of that, again, just comes from exercising your franchise. It comes from voting, that things can happen. And perhaps a good way to do it sometimes is to look at the other side, how effective they can be. And for me, the other side, as of this taping, is the party now in power. How effective they have been in dismantling social services, in dismantling the sciences, or at least the government's support for the sciences, how they've been effective in dismantling the support for education services, and recognize that sometimes we are so far removed that we don't recognize it. Sometimes the impact is immediate, but it is that you can see change, you can experience change, even if sometimes it's glacial, even if sometimes it feels as though it's not happening quickly enough for you. It's that any positive change is beneficial, and the one thing we can do to move it, and again, is to show the receipts. Here's where we see where people have benefited. Here's where we see where people have lost because of political will, or the absence of political will, and try to motivate them to say, we just got to do what we can. So yeah, I don't have a rousing speech that says, oh, if we just pull ourselves up and dust ourselves off and we can do. No, it's here's how you do it, and here's where it has worked, and hope that we can drive folks to act in their own self-interest.
Well, thank you so much. I absolutely appreciate you being here. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Dr. Karl. Thank you, Love Bay, for bearing with me through the technical difficulties. I believe that this is a conversation that we should continue. If you would like to come back, we would love to be able to keep talking about it. I thank you for what you do as a professor, for the young men that you are there for, who you can support and encourage through what you do and through what you plan to do through Congress. I appreciate the efforts that you are putting forth. Thank you, Jen, so much for being here with us. As we go on tonight, I really, Dr. Karl, would just love for you to leave Love Bay with your final thoughts on our topic on tonight, the mental and emotional health of men. So if you give us our final words on tonight before we go.
Absolutely. Simply, I'll say this in two parts. First, it's that we should all recognize, and unfortunately, yes, this may seem burdensome, but I think we all have a shared responsibility to acknowledge that men are oftentimes simply, through social conditioning throughout their lives, are ill-equipped, but nonetheless are victims of the absence of support services, the absence of reinforced positive mental and emotional well-being. And we as a society deal with the ramifications and the fallout because of that. So ultimately, we are also the ones to benefit if we can collectively try to address this problem. And the second piece I'd like to say is I'm actually, what you are doing here is extremely positive and extremely moving and motivating, even just simply giving resources to how folks can seek help in place of what others would oftentimes do here, which is just dropping ads. You're actually trying to help in an actionable way I love this approach. I love what you do, and I'm happy that I was able to be here with you today to help be a part of the solution.
Well, thank you so much, and we are already looking forward to having you come back. Jen, would you leave us with your final word on tonight?
Sure. I just want to thank you, Dr. Karl, for showing up, for being vulnerable, and for speaking truth. I think that your experience is valuable and resonates with a lot of people, a lot of men. Specifically your experience as a Black man. And I think it's important that, you know, you went there tonight, that it isn't just there aren't just gender lines. There's a lot of intersectionality here that needs to be addressed. So I appreciate that, because it's not, unfortunately, a one size fits all. And that's, you know, those are the things that we have to address when we're working towards solutions. We can't ignore that. So yeah, I just appreciate your candor and your willingness to speak on an issue that is difficult and doesn't offer like a really great tie the bow at the end, happy ending.
Yeah. Well, we all do what we can. Baby steps.
Thank you so much. Thank you again, Jen. Thank you, Dr. Karl. Love Bay, if you want to catch up on previous episodes of our program, you can visit our YouTube channel, Suffering in Silence DV. Please remember also to like, share, and subscribe. You can also visit the other social media channels through Love Bay, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. I think that's it. I think I got all of them, TYB. But thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining Suffering in Silence with Pastor Tia here on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. Love Bay, we are continuing to rise out of the ashes together. Good evening.